Hello again, dear friends. It's Carly, and welcome back to another episode of I Learned. This is part two of the emotional intelligence discussion that we started on the last episode. And I'm gonna quick lay a foundation to get us back into where we were. Basically, I dug out my emotional intelligence assessment from 6 years ago this morning and am going through it with fresh eyes and seeing how did all of this unfold? How did emotional intelligence play a role, both in terms of my own personal emotional intelligence and knowing about it, like getting to learn about it and being confronted with this body of work. Because as I mentioned, my previous belief about myself was I'm an empty robot. And then I get handed a report in a work training where I thought they were all going to find out that I'm an empty robot. I get handed a report that says, actually, you're top of the class. And I was not prepared for that at all. Obviously, that's great and cool that you think so, but I was not owning those abilities. I was not even necessarily aware of those abilities. I literally thought I was an empty robot. So the fact that no, you have emotions and you're actually very good with emotions, I was like, wait, what? So that led to a dive down a rabbit hole on my Pinterest board, INTJ female, where I was all about studying emotional intelligence and getting that basis of knowledge around emotions and what they are and what they mean and what does it mean to actually have emotional intelligence? How can that help you in your day-to-day life and in your relationships and in your outcomes? Like, how is your life unfolding? How happy are you with the way that it's unfolding? And if you want it to be better, a lot of times the way to get better is to get better at emotional intelligence and managing your emotions. Going back to, again, last episode, I gave you the four areas of emotional intelligence, or the four abilities. First and foremost, you have to be able to perceive emotions, and that lets you then use emotions and understand emotions and manage emotions. So those are incremental steps where the end result is the managing emotions. That is like demonstrating true emotional intelligence, is being able to manage your own and other people's emotions. Um, it's actually two different skills, I found out, to manage your emotions versus managing other people's. And on this test, they told me you are exceptional, like expert level at managing other people's emotions, but you seem to be out of touch with your own. And I was like, wow, way to slap me in the face with some truth. Thank you for that. So those are the four stages, though. So that very first one, perceiving emotions, that's how you recognize the emotional tone around you. So this is communicated by our body language, by our tone of voice, by our specific choice of words, by just our overall portrayal in the world is full of the emotions that we're feeling. It's, typically very difficult to hide totally the emotions that we feel because they color and give life to how we behave in the world. So even if you're not saying a word, you're still carrying emotional energy in your body, and perceiving emotions is about being able to read that in the world around you. And so the two areas, and I didn't get this deep last time, but we are this time because we have a whole nother hour to sit here. The two areas of perceiving emotions, like I said, each of the four abilities is broken down into two sub abilities. And so perceiving emotions is broken into faces and pictures. So this is so fun. Faces means a still picture of someone's face, and they asked you, what is this person feeling? And so you read the emotion on their face and said what they're feeling. So it seems pretty straightforward. But that's that's basically like one piece of perceiving emotions is, can you see the emotions on other people? Do you, when you see a certain facial expression, do you have an emotional vocabulary word to identify and label they're feeling fear, they're feeling sadness, they're feeling glee or bliss? Do you have a word to put on it? So that's faces in perceiving emotions. The pictures task is this concept that like an abstract painting or a landscape, or just kind of like an inanimate object, a car. Those inanimate objects are still conveying an emotional tone. So can you assess and label the emotional tone of inanimate objects that are clearly, obviously not feeling emotions themselves, but they're still communicating emotions because the creator has imbued its own emotion into the inanimate object? So can you read that? Like when you look around at a landscape, do you know, is this cheerful? Is this dark and mysterious? Is this, there are many different emotions that could be conveyed through a landscape. So that's one example of pictures. Um, and so those, I both like faces and pictures. I got expert level on both of those, being able to perceive those. And that's where I go back in that first episode to talk about my mother wound and tying that into this, where I would offer my take, my read of the situation, of the emotions of the situation, and I would tell this to my mom, and thinking that I was like doing good and telling the truth and being helpful, and her response was typically no, like no, it's not like that, just don't worry about it, he's fine, like it's fine, just go on and mind your business, basically. And so I have this innate ability to see these things, but my environment was telling me I was wrong. And that happened early enough and often enough that I basically developed a belief that yes, I have what I think is happening. Like I have my emotional read of things, but I don't trust it, because every time I think I'm right and I voice something to someone about it, they tell me I'm wrong. And I talk in the last episode about having to learn that when people aren't ready to face something, you can be as right as right can be, but if they don't want to hear it, they're gonna lie basically and tell you that you're wrong, or maybe not even lie, that their mind just isn't ready to go there. So their awareness won't let them see what it is that you see. And I mean, that's just human nature. We all have our own unique awareness. So I've had to learn that just because I can't back it up with other people agreeing with me, my gut instinct is still correct. And learning to trust that it's been a process. It's been 6 years so far of practicing it, and I'm getting decently good at it. But there are times, like I told a couple episodes ago about the guy who gave me my solar return reading, telling me to don't have so much faith in the universe, that I need to do my work and like not just leave it up to the universe. And that was kind of a moment where, I mean, I feel like he challenged my emotional read on things. I do have that much faith in the universe because I can feel the truth in that, and I can sense the unfolding that's happening, and all of those are emotional skills. And I do trust that. And then he said, don't just leave it up to the universe. And I'm like, wait, no, but I can feel the universe working on it, and I can feel the universe delivering it to me. And you're saying don't trust that it's happening that way? And I felt like I was kind of right back in that moment where somebody was telling me my emotional sense was wrong. And it took me a couple weeks of sitting with it, but I did come to the conclusion, no, I'm right. I absolutely should trust my sense of what's going on in my environment. Nobody else has access to my environment the same as I do. So what they're telling me is a reflection of them and their environment. And that's the best anybody can ever do. And so, because I have that awareness now, I'm able to, not be completely undone by this person who's basically telling me to some extent that I'm doing it wrong. And that feels pretty good. That feels like new territory. That feels like a step in the right direction. So, am I completely rock solid in trusting my intuition and following like my own personal emotional sense of things? I'm pretty solid. Could I be more solid? Always. So, more to come on that. So, that is perceiving emotions, the very most basic task in emotional intelligence. Once you have emotions that you've perceived, you have that emotional energy or that emotional data, then you get to using emotions. And that is broken down into two tasks. We talked a little bit about what using emotions is for. It's like using that emotional energy to help you in what you're wanting to do. The example I gave was I like to do fun things. And when there is something that I don't want to do or I don't feel like doing it, I find a way to make it fun. That's using emotional energy to color the way you think about something and having a better outcome with that task as a result of it, because you're bringing excitement, you're bringing fun, you're looking forward to it, you're happy to be there because it's fun. Not I don't want to do this and I fucking hate this and when is it going to be over and why do I have to do this? Why can't somebody else do this? And like now you're just stirring up trouble. So I like to make things fun. So that's an example of using our emotions. So there's two tasks within using emotions. The first one is sensations. And this is where I'm going to read this to you again. So published research suggests that this task is related to the ability to feel what others feel. That's because primary emotions are accompanied by a set of physiological changes and reactions, meaning physiological, like meaning in your body. Anger, for example, has a very different set of physiological changes associated with it than happiness. If you are able to generate an emotion, you should also be able to generate some of these same physiological reactions. So, yeah, that's a lot. That's a mouthful. Getting into, though, so sensations, let's see. Because I didn't score at the highest level on this, the suggestion to develop it is included, which is consider whether you are more or less comfortable with certain situations or emotions. And basically this is saying like you seem to be good at this, but only in part of the emotional spectrum. You seem to be blocking some of the feelings. And again, I was like, yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Another piece, emotion and thought are intertwined, and decision making does not and cannot occur in the absence of emotions. And this is where, emotional intelligence is having its way with your life, whether you choose to participate in it or not, because decision making cannot and does not occur in the absence of emotion. So, whatever your emotion is, it's present and it's coloring your thinking and your decision making. So, the argument then becomes to be aware of it and to guide it as much as you possibly can. And being able to guide the emotion that you're feeling is this ability to facilitate emotions. So sensation is knowing how emotional energy correlates to your body, and facilitation is oh, there we go. This ability may help you to focus on what's really important or to get others to do the same. It can be used to help yourself and others perform their best. So, kind of like making the best of things and getting people excited about what they're there to do. Because again, you can show up to do a task and be all frowny faced about it and miserable. And like imagine, I use this skill a lot actually when I was developing Cecil K's, because I had to think and envision, what do I want from my cashiers? And really, the main thing is that they are the first face that the customer sees when they walk in the door. So, the main thing that I want from them is a positive, upbeat, welcoming attitude where they are smiling and cheerfully greeting every single customer that enters the store. Because right from the entry point of the store, we want to influence the customer to feel safe and happy and welcome in our environment, because they'll stay longer, they'll look at more details of what is there, if they feel secure and happy and welcome in their environment. That just feels like second nature to me, that if they like it there, they'll stay longer. So that seems like a good place to start. So if the cashier is showing up every day being all frowny face and they do not have the ability to be in a good mood at work, very quickly I begin giving them feedback about their performance, being that they need to show up with more positivity, more pep in their step. And if they can't muster that, then they don't get to continue working at the store. So that is a very clear-cut example of how using emotions can and does play a part in our career success every single day. Like that, I feel like that's kind of where I was at ISN, where before I talked in the last episode about my CDQA job that kind of helped me get a sense of self-confidence and appreciating myself and my talents. Before I got there, I had been at the company for about 2.5 years, and I felt like I was hitting this ceiling where I didn't like my job. I didn't feel like it mattered. I wasn't getting good feedback from my superiors. They were like, yeah, you're average. Um, and so much of it was because I was doing the work and I was really good at doing the work, but my social skills, my people skills, I was just so annoyed by everyone, basically. I was irritated with my coworkers. They weren't working hard enough. I was irritated with my clients. They were babies and whining and on and on. And I just was frustrated by the whole deal. And that was the tone that I took with my bosses. And here they are telling me, yeah, you're average. Like, no, we don't have any glowing words to say about your work. And now looking back on it, I'm like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Because what was I facilitating when I showed up frustrated and frowny and annoyed that I had to interact with all of these people? I was facilitating an environment where they felt that way about me. They didn't want to be in the room with me. They didn't feel good. I wasn't helping them to feel good. So no, they wanted to stay in the room as short as possible. So yeah, it goes both ways. Like, just because you're good at something doesn't mean that you're good at something across the board in all situations. It's very much a work in progress. Okay, so the next one is understanding emotions. And for this, I'm also going to flip back and go through that ability overall and then come back to the two subsets since we didn't make it that far in episode 1. I know this is like so clear as mud. So, understanding emotions as a skill is, here's one way that they explain it. Your opinion on how someone will take a certain piece of news may be more valid than someone else's opinion who does not have your level of emotional knowledge. You have a rich emotional vocabulary and may be able to predict how people's feelings change as they experience different events. And so you think about it like, again, it feels like second nature to me, but going back to Cecil K's, like if I have constructive feedback to give to my cashier and the cashier shows up and they are clearly agitated, they are already flustered, they are already in a toot and snippy and just tense and all of these things that I would look at a person and be like, wow, okay, now is not a great time to approach them. But at the same time, like from a business perspective, it's like a necessary time to approach them because that is exactly the opposite energy that I want from my cashier. So this needs to be addressed. And so I feel like Cecil K's and managing employees really helped me with this understanding of emotions and broadening my abilities to address emotions, because old Carly and not the boss Carly, not the boss, not my problem, that version would just move on with her life and be like, yeah, looks like that lady's having a hard day. But boss Carly, which I totally signed up to be, was like, I can't have my employee greeting customers with that sourpuss face on. Like, no, no, that can't be. Like, and there were a couple days where I cashiered myself all day long because I needed the cashier to provide a certain emotional energy to our customers, and the cashier that showed up was not capable of doing that, was not in a good enough mood to stay and be the face that greeted every single person that walked in the store that day. Wasn't going to happen. But approaching somebody when they're in that state is risky. That's why normally I don't do it. But when you're the boss and when, it's a business outcome that's on the line, you kind of have to do it and you have to figure out a way to do it. And so that's where empathy and the understanding of emotions and putting yourself in their shoes and taking off the boss hat for a minute and putting on your self hat. Like, what if this was you having a bad day? Like, you would want empathy and understanding from your boss, and you would want to not get fired. I mean, you're not going to get to stay and work your hours, so your paycheck's taking a hit, but I'm not firing you over this. That's what I would want, is the opportunity to go home and feel better and come back tomorrow and try again. And so I got better and better and better at delivering feedback that sounded like that. Like what you're doing is not acceptable. Like, you need a more positive attitude with your job right now. But you're not a bad person. Because you're in this bad mood doesn't make you a bad person. I'm not condemning you as a person. I'm telling you that your attitude needs an adjustment, which is totally doable. But obviously, when you're in that situation and the person is already agitated, you can't deliver it like that. It requires more finesse. And I'm still not great at it, but I've definitely gotten better. Have I fucked it up royally multiple times as the boss of Cecil K's? Yes, I did. And have I hit a couple home runs like here in the last year or two? Yeah, I did. And it felt really nice to also live a life where I don't have to do that very often. And yes, that is, like, again, even though you're good at facilitating emotions, for example, doesn't mean that you enjoy it, doesn't mean that you like it, doesn't mean that you want to do it on a daily basis. But is it still a skill that's good to have in your back pocket when you need it? Apparently. So that is understanding emotions. And the tasks, let's see here. The tasks are changes and blends. So, changes, interesting. This section measures your ability to understand how emotions change over time. These items are Emotions have their own moves, just like pieces on a chessboard. Emotions arise from certain causes and they develop and change in a set way. This task measures your knowledge of emotions and how they change and develop. So, this basically how I scored on this one. The suggestion was like, you probably have some insight into people and can figure out how feelings progress and change, although there may be certain emotions that you find difficult to predict. And again, they're telling me like you're really only tapping into part of the emotional system. And all of that, to me, like going back to the energetic grid conversation, when I'm only accessing certain emotions or only trying to access certain emotions, what I'm actually doing is shutting down my entire system. I'm actually blocking my entire energy flow. Again, this is something I learned from Brené Brown, that we cannot selectively numb emotions. And I was numbing a lot. I wasn't doing my introspective work. I wasn't doing my journaling. So I wasn't looking at it, for one thing. And when it did come up, when it did bubble to the surface into my reality, I worked to minimize it and move on as fast as I could. And for the rest of the time, just keep myself occupied and just don't think about my emotions. And they would erupt every now and then, and I would try to move past it as quickly as I could. So the report seems to have a theme that, like, apparently you're trying to block off some of the emotions. And I'm like, yeah, the painful ones, duh. And, as Brené Brown teaches, you can't do that. And this also suggests that I expand into more of the emotional spectrum. So that's the changes task, that things evolve, and their example was like frustration or annoyance. It can end at that. You can be slightly annoyed at something and you can say something or fix it, and now the grievance is not there anymore, and now the annoyance is gone because the grievance isn't there, and now you're not annoyed. That can be the end of it. Or the annoyance, like the grievance comes, you get annoyed, and the grievance doesn't go away. And so you get annoyed some more. And then you get really frustrated because the grievance isn't going away and you've been annoyed for longer than you would like. And so that's frustrating because apparently you don't know how to fix the grievance if it's not gone yet. And if it's still not gone, that frustration builds into anger. Now you're mad at the grievance because you're really upsetting my apple cart, you're rocking my boat, you are complicating my life in a way that I do not like, and I don't know how to get you to stop, and now I'm mad about it. And if anger is left unchecked, that leads to rage. And so, I mean, it's an evolution. We don't just start by becoming enraged. It started much smaller than that and was left to build over time. So that's understanding how emotions change. This next one is probably my most favorite. I also scored really high in this section, which is blends. And again, under understanding emotions, blending is emotions are complex and people can experience a combination of different emotions. There are simple emotions and complex ones. Emotion theory might not specify combinations of emotions with the accuracy of chemistry, but we know a lot about how simple emotions combine to form more complex and sometimes subtle emotions. You seem to be able to grasp and describe subtle emotional information. You have good emotional insight. You understand the nuances of emotion and can explain these subtleties with great detail. Your emotional vocabulary is impressive, and others may recognize your insightful nature. I was like, well, hell yeah, that all sounds really cool. Again, going back to the very first step of perceiving emotions and being taught that my perception was wrong and not on point at all. Again, this one was completely brand new information because I thought I've been off base this whole time. And now this is telling me that no, actually, you're on base, you're really good at it, and you're especially really good at it when you get into complex emotions where multiple emotions are present, where it's not just one simple surface level feeling. It's a really complex situation with a lot of factors and a lot of simultaneous emotions that are blending into one overall reaction. Absolutely. That's like definitely, yeah, I was going to say sweet spot. Sounds weird, but it kind of is. I really enjoy complex emotional territory. And then the last one, the last ability when it comes to emotional intelligence, and this is where I scored the lowest by quite a little chunk, is managing emotions. And I'll even start with the two tasks because it really puts it into perspective. Like I said, there's two groups of emotions that you can manage: other people's and your own. And again, I scored expert on managing other people's emotions and really, really, really lacking on managing my own emotions. And the suggestions for improvement are to start checking in with myself, to work on my own emotional awareness. Let's see. You may not always here, yeah. You generally stay open to emotions, and you are often able to choose strategies that will include these important feelings-based data. You may not always include such data or may have a hard time staying open to certain emotions. I'm like, again, the painful ones. I don't, call me crazy, but I don't like emotional pain when it's my own. So yeah, really not others either, but that's a lot easier to take, which is the emotional relationship task, managing other people's emotions. And that plays such an important role in our ability to get a certain emotional outcome in social situations. And that's a fancy way of saying, like, can you make a friend? Can you get into a relationship? Can you make a business partner and open a business together and work in business together as partners for years and years? Like, how are you doing at those things? And that is wrapped up in this emotional relationship task. The basis for this task: some ways of dealing with other people are better or worse than others. We have a good knowledge base of what is effective in determining certain outcomes and what doesn't work that well. So, going back to, I forget which episode I was talking about this, but in the energetic grid and the pipes, where it used to be I would explode and scream and yell mean things at people. Yeah, I can tell you from firsthand experience that doesn't work as far as a method for getting what you want. So, it's a big process of trial and error. But I did learn that, kind of like I talked about with the cashiers, like approaching people with empathy and understanding and putting you in their position and then talking to them like, well, I guess that doesn't really work unless you love yourself. If you're mean to yourself, then you're probably pretty likely to be mean to other people. But if you're nice to yourself, then you're a lot more likely to be nice to other people. So this relationship aspect where, like, really getting the outcome that you want, even when you're doing solo projects, quote unquote, like, at some point you have to get with other people for that project to come to fruition. I'm like racking my brain trying to think of an example where that's not the case, and I'm not really coming up with an example. We have to connect with other people. And this was another one where I scored expert, and here I am in the middle of a loveless engagement and no real close friends to speak of, and barely a relationship with my family because we don't get along. So I was pretty disconnected. And then again, here's a piece of paper in front of me saying, "You're really good at this." And I'm like, I don't think so. I don't see how. And now I do see that, yeah, I am good at that. I do spend a lot of time choosing now, especially, to disconnect from other people and connect to myself, to spend more time on the end of the stick where I manage my own emotions, where I get to know my own emotions and build my own emotional awareness within myself, within my own inner world. And then when I come out, I mean, especially with where I'm at right now in my life coaching and consulting and working with the other managers at Cecil K's, the relationships around me are, for the most part, going really well. And often I have successful outcomes in my dealings with other people. And often I get feedback from them about how enjoyable it is to get to work with me. Or, I have listeners on this podcast who want to hang out with me while I ramble on and on and on, seemingly endlessly. I'm liked. And again, I have to stop and appreciate, even though it sounds kind of sad, I have to appreciate that this is new territory. And there was so much time in my life where I was on autopilot with all of this, with my emotions, ignoring them and letting them erupt and rain lava, basically, all over my life, all over my relationships, all over my family, all over my job. And then I try to show up the next day like nothing happened. And other people remember. They hold grudges. When you explode on them, they don't forget. It takes a lot of time and effort to rebuild trust and rapport and relationship and communication channels. And yeah, when you explode, things are exploded and it destroys those relationships. And I lived in that place for a really long time. And now I have to look around and give myself some credit that I don't explode anymore. I process my shit in my journal. It used to feel like it was going to explode like almost every day. And now, like, I feel like the daily journaling early on was relieving the pressure on that daily explosion. It got to where, the explosion was more like maybe every week or two. There was something that I had a bad day and I was just really frustrated, and it was a harder day. And then it was like, now it's every couple months that I have a hard day. and maybe the hard day is like a hard weekend or a hard couple days. And then it got to where it's like every 4 or 5 months, I go through like a dark couple days. And that's basically where I'm at right now. It's like I feel good all the time. And every day, there are things that frustrate me. There are things that annoy me. There are things that poke at my buttons. There are things that sometimes it's a bigger wobble than others, but every day I wobble. And in my journal, I work it out. I work my way back over to gratitude. I I journal basically every morning. One of the first things I journal is what the highlight of yesterday was. Like, as I wake up this morning, the best thing about yesterday was this, and I write the story of that thing. And typically, by the time I'm done writing that story of like how cool that was yesterday, I'm on easily into milking that good feeling and getting the energy going to have a good day again today and set that expectation that today's going to be good, just like yesterday was. And I've been in that loop for a long time. And so much of the credit that preach basically on this podcast, especially, is that managing emotions is how I do that. And I've told the story many times of how I give credit to Abraham for teaching me how to manage my emotions. But really, for me, it was a whole nother step before that of even opening to the fact that I did have emotions, that I actually had more natural talent in this area than my life had ever caused me to believe before. And that this was all waiting here for me if I wanted to walk into it, if I wanted to look inward and get to know myself, get to know these skills that apparently I have, that no one has ever agreed that I have these skills before, just this piece of paper. Am I really going to believe it? Well, 6 years later, I basically decided that, yeah, okay, I'll believe it. But it took a long time. It was a process to get from where I was to where I am now. And the unfolding of it was all in perfect harmony with my readiness every step along the way. Like I said, I found Myers-Briggs and my INTJ personality type, and that got me started wondering about, could I get better at managing my emotions or interacting with my emotions or reading other people's emotions and having more successful friendships? Like, is that really something I could get better at if I practiced it? And then I get this emotional intelligence assessment that tells me, wow, you already have a lot of natural talent. And that was like a whiplash moment of spending the next 15 months getting up to speed with what emotional intelligence actually meant and my natural abilities in this area. And that got me ready to meet Abraham. And now it's been 5 years of studying with Abraham on how to use your personal emotions as your emotional guidance system to basically act out your soul's mission. And the whole reason, the whole purpose for your soul coming forward in this lifetime, your emotions guide you straight there. That's how I got here. And that's what I believe I'm doing here, is acting out what my soul wants from me, like soul level fulfillment, self actualization, discovering our innermost, authentic, individualized self, who we were born to be, living our purpose, living our own unique bliss. All of that sounded really, really alluring to me back in the day. And I decided, yeah, it's worth it. I think it's worth it to do the daily check-in and to see, how do I feel today? What am I grateful for? Can I, just like using emotions, that was the ability where we talked about like deciding, I want to do fun things, so I'm going to try to find a way to make this fun. I decided I want to feel good in my life, so I'm going to try to find a way to see if I can generate some good feelings inside of myself. And I found that when I write a gratitude list, it generated a good feeling inside of myself. And as I listened to Abraham, I learned to like take that good feeling and milk it and invest in it and focus on it and get the momentum going around it and think about it and really just like get wrapped up in it and spend some time in it and watch it grow, watch it get bigger. And so every morning I use emotions, quote unquote, to create joy, create good feeling, and then let my day unfold from there. So, being a deliberate creator, like what Abraham teaches, or being emotionally intelligent, if that's how you want to talk about it, all of these things point towards start in the morning, focus yourself into as good as you can possibly feel, check in and honor whatever emotional energy is present within you. Take a second to really see yourself and do the best you can today, and tomorrow morning do it again, and do the best you can in that day, and tomorrow morning do it again. And yeah, it adds up. The ability to work with your own emotions and to expand the range of emotions you're willing to feel, you're willing to accept and willing to observe and interact with, um, to not be so scared, especially of the painful emotions that, one of the things that I learned that really, really, really helped me in this space is emotions are temporary. Really, first, pain is temporary. That was how I came to this. And I don't know if I picked it up somewhere. I hate to take credit for it because I probably did let it sink into my subconscious at some point, but pain is temporary. And I use that a lot uh, to soothe myself in painful moments, especially emotionally and physically, but emotionally, like pain is temporary. I've been happy before, I'll be happy again. Emotions are temporary, they're fluid, they're constantly changing. That's typically how I pivot out of emotions that I'm not ready to sit with. I like there's still things on that list where sometimes it's really painful to feel your feelings, and it's natural to want to protect yourself from that pain. But being open is the key. And as you're ready to expand your abilities, and it's no different than building muscles. Like, you want to bench press 200 pounds. Like, well, I'm not going to lay down there and bench press 200 pounds today. Probably not ever in my lifetime based on my frame, but let's even say 100 pounds. Like, I doubt I could even do 100 pounds. But if I laid down and I bench pressed 40 pounds, like a few times today, and then tomorrow, again, I did it some more. And then the next day I did it some more. And in a couple weeks, I was up to 50 pounds. And every day I was practicing and I was growing and I was flexing my muscles and growing my muscles. And eventually I may just very well work up into bench pressing 100 pounds, maybe 150. If I keep going and I keep improving and keep building my skills, I do get better and better and better and better and better. So that's a really cool thing to know. That's a very self-empowering thing to know. I feel like it especially comes into play if you are wanting to work on your emotional intelligence and you're wanting to improve the outcomes that you're having in your life. Um, that's a good bridge of, this is temporary. This is, I'm only going to take as much as I can take right now. And then I'm going to let myself disengage from that and put it back down there wherever it came from, wherever it was before I was feeling it. And I'm going to try to feel happy right now. And I'm going to just keep getting a little bit better and a little bit better. And maybe I'm not ready to face that today, but maybe I will be someday. And it is such a process of loving yourself and giving yourself grace that you don't need to be perfect ever. Emotions are kind of the opposite of perfection. It's like the hot and cold game, like hotter, hotter, colder, colder. Like your emotions are always going to be giving you that guidance of, are you headed towards your true soul self actualizing, or are you walking away from it? And none of it's wrong. But if you want to actualize your soul self, you got to follow the positive emotions. Like, I feel like it's a no brainer, but obviously it's a subject I'm passionate about. It has been playing its role even before Abraham came into the picture. Um, Emotional intelligence is absolutely a game changer, and I I hope this was helpful. I hope honestly, I hope it inspires you someday, maybe not today, to dive down the rabbit hole that's waiting, that's Googling emotional intelligence and why is it important? Um, because that's a skill that's like, there's no top end to how good your life can be. There's no top end to how good your outcomes can be. And it is, I mean, in all the research I've ever seen, everyone agrees it is absolutely a skill that you can build with deliberate practice. So the more you build your skill, the more you build your muscles, the stronger you are and the better your outcomes become. So until next time, dear friends, this was quite a monologue on emotional intelligence, and I genuinely thank you for listening and thank you for sharing this space with me. Until next time, you take good care, and I will too.